Predictably, the attempt by the government to sweet talk Cameroonians in the diaspora on the contours and impacts of the Anglophone crisis has sequentially backfired, and woefully so, from Washington, D.C. through Brussels to Pretoria in South Africa. In this edition, we ask, are the authorities in Cameroon this myopic? Elsewhere, will schools eventually resume in September across English-speaking northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon? That's the zillion-dollar question as the countdown fast narrows to D-Day. In this edition, we ask, is it safe to conclude that the crisis has exposed the limits and limitations inherent in the Cameroonian governance system? Welcome to another installment of the Tough Talking Journey. We'll be with you in a jiffy. And it's always such a pleasure to be flanked by them. On my left is Elie Smith. Elie, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here again today.
I was looking at some commentary on the YouTube channel that you so beautifully manage. And well, one of the respondents is called Monju Paul. He's actually accusing us of not handling the speech made by SCACOF President Tabe Julius. And the idea is that we are not here to sound the echo, so be echo boxes for any of these groups.
Exactly. What we need to tell them is that we are just journalists and we are not PR officials or members or staff of SCACOF or whatever, Morix, no. We are journalists and we are bound to be objective. And I think we have spoken extensively about SCACOF and Morix, and we don't need to be interpreting the speeches of the president of a faction, because first of all, it is not a kind of united group. Morix stands on one part, SCACOF there, so it's a kind of disorganized lot. That doesn't seem to augur well for a movement or for a group of people who wants to aspire to become a nation.
Kejan Henry, here on my right hand. Welcome.
Thanks very much.
Let me tell you one of the commentaries I read on you. It comes from Nikki Confidence. That's how she calls herself. She says you're a double-edged sword. would you agree to such an observation?
Well, sometimes you will always receive comments, and we are happy, when we receive comments like that. But generally, why we have not, I suppose, received quarrels is because we tend to do balance. It's not like always at the end pulling the trigger to kill. Okay. And that is why the other day Elie said if Mr. Biya has done one small thing, they should congratulate him for that, which means we are not only here to say we are criticizing or look at everything bad, but we try to tell the other side of the good things.
I love to say that on Tough Talk on Canal English exclusively, we are factually blunt. That's our ambition, and yet meticulously to the point. So we try to say it as it is. And now let's say it as it is, Henry. You were there on Friday the 5th of August, was that Saturday?
Saturday.
At the burial of the late Zakaringo, who died on the 3rd of June. And well, it's an iconic and a pace-setting football commentator for Cameroon and Cameroonians in general. Unfortunately, there were conspicuous absences in Boya at the weekend.
You are correct. Conspicuous absence. I want to say that Uncle Zach is resting, happily resting in the bosom of his father, despite man's wickedness to him. Wickedness in the fact that Uncle Zach haven't served a nation in that capacity, not only a nation, haven't groomed thousands, haven't inspired millions, and did not receive any recognition. And we hear from some of his colleagues, from his former media house, like I'm talking about the CRT,
Canal Radio,
he worked
and television.
And television. No representative, no condolence letter, nothing from the government, no decoration. But those who attended Zach's burial or funeral will attest to the fact that he was a man, a complete man. And the one good thing they talk about him is his simplicity on earth. Despite his despite his stardom, which he was.
Elie Smith, not even Aben Benge was there. This is someone he has, you know, co-commented matches for Cameroon across the world, Africa especially.
Yes, I was really shocked when I discovered that even Abel Mbenge of all people, the Cameroonian government, we know they are very ungrateful lords. They don't know how to recognize anybody. At least his friend, which shows that Abel Mbenge is a dishonest man. And the other thing is that, let's be factual, the problem is that Zakaringo was an Anglophone. If he was a Francophone, the Francophone government of Yaoundé would have done everything to elevate him. The thing is that since they saw that it's an Anglophone who is popular, they don't want to render him. I feel very bad when Kejang was relating everything that happened, and that even CRTV did not send anybody. This is
scandalous.
They don't care at CRTV if you are an Anglophone. You can look at even the recent appointment, how they have marginalized Anglophones. And I understand this man called Charles Ndongo says that, oh, I have appointed them, I have given them 4 whatever directors of stations. We know that it is a lie. The thing is that this country, and that's the reason why we have problems in this country, because they don't want to acknowledge us. If it were an ordinary musician who died here, you'd have seen all of them come around to give him or her a posthumous recognition. And we also saw what happened recently when Laurent Esso went to decorate somebody that the church, Cleda, is accusing them of having assassinated. But look at somebody like Mr. Zakaringo. I'm not surprised, but I felt very bad, especially that even Mr. Mbenge never went there.
The Minister of Sports.
The Minister of Sport, the Minister of Communication, nobody went there. So it is really a pity. But as I say in Latin, Vox Populis, Vox Dei. The people love Mr. Zakaringo, and he will live in our memory forever.
All right. Thanks very much for dropping those comments for our icebreaker in this other edition of Tough Talk. Let's move on to our first major sticking point. From an aloof perspective, one may be led to conclude that the perceptible calm prevailing across English-speaking Cameroon may be heralding a hate-free return to school come September. But embracing that standpoint may be naive and to an extent foolhardy, because strickling reports have been emphatically mentioning plans by a group of hardliners of the struggle to, thwart and frustrate any attempts at school resumption in the northwest and southwest regions. Elie, I'll stay with you. Activist with the outlawed Cameroon Anglophone Civil Society Consortium, which is currently piloted from abroad by the likes of Tassan Wilfred and barrister Eyambe Elias. They have vowed that no school will reopen in that part of the country. We are only weeks to go now.
Yes, but before they could even come out with their declaration, I think we had already said that here a long time ago. We had predicted it. We might be people.
Is that a threat to take seriously?
Yet it should be taken seriously, because the group or individuals who are really fanning it sadly doesn't come even from abroad. They come from within, and it is the government, because the government has all in their capacity to try to appease the situation, but the government is arrogantly and stupidly trying to think that they will continue to detain the leaders of a people, and you expect those people to ignore them, because the act of people refusing to send their children to school is not as though they don't want their children to be educated. It's because there's no single Anglophone in this country, even Francophones, who do not know how dishonest and mischievous this government is. They know pretty well that by sending their children to school, it is going to be victory for the people in Yaoundé, and those people who are there will be forgotten. And that is the simple reason why. That's why I say we want people to go back to school, but the government should help us to help people to go back to school by being honest, humble, and free all those who are in jail.
In a recent letter to the head of state, Kawala Edith, who's president of the Cameroon People's Party, actually remarked that some 3 million kids across the English-speaking northwest and southwest regions risk losing another school year as a result of the Anglophone crisis. Keja Henry released signed recently and jointly by Tassan Wilfred and Iyambe Elias, notes that the outlawed consortium would consider anyone sympathizing with the back-to-school clamors as a blackleg, a traitor, and that his ground soldiers will do everything to implement zero school option.
Yeah, it's a very strong one coming from Tassan and Iyambe. But to answer that question, I want to say that the diaspora is now the cradle of the resistance.
Okay.
So you can imagine it is threatening. And even before that communique came up, parents had taken a stand. And don't forget that we move around trying to get opinion, find out from parents what they think about back to school. And even from the children, some children are very categorical.
Now, Henry, the question is, I take you back to the roots of this. Because I asked Elie if this could be considered a serious threat. Now we're looking at the education future for 3 million above kids.
You're right.
The question in there is, I mean, because they say they would consider anyone sympathizing with the back-to-school call as a traitor, who would dare sympathize with the cause for back-to-school?
No, everybody sympathizes for the call for back-to-school. Everybody sympathizes. But then the question is, what is the part of the government? What is the role the government is playing to help all the 3 million children go back to school? And that's what we are saying here. If the government could facilitate or could come out and tell the people that these are the concessions that we have granted after the talks that collapsed, after having seen how the resistance have been moving, then we are preparing for this. But it's threatening from Tassan and Barrister Iyambe, but it is something that we all have to tell the government that let us sit and discuss these issues, let the children go back to school.
Elie, it may be inexpedient to rush to the conclusion that the authorities are taking this threat for granted, but the missions deployed abroad to sweet talk, that's why the way I see it, the Cameroonian diaspora is indicative of the fact that the government is very concerned. It's not sitting there and folding its arms and legs.
Yes, they are concerned. They might pride themselves here as if they are deaf, but they have understood that they took the Anglophone nationalism for a joke simply because some of them do not know the history of Anglophone Cameroon. But now they have discovered that it is really serious. Hence, they have decided to take the fight abroad where they think the epicenter of what is going on is takes place. But I think they were wrong.
Okay.
You cannot forfeit negotiation at home and think that when you go abroad, those who are there will welcome you with open arms and things like that. So
we have a big package on the hostile reception reserved members of the delegations being deployed across the world. We'll come to it. Let me turn over to Kejan. So how can the government counteract this threat? The remilitarization of those regions?
On the contrary, if the government keeps reinforcing the military might in those regions, it will mean that the government is not willing in any way to help these children go back to school.
Okay.
The only fear I have is that the day any jet fighter will fly mistakenly across that territory will send a very bad precedence to the people. Already they have it in their mind that they will not go back to school. The church has opened its doors. As we all know, the governor of the Southwest region, Bernard Okalabilai, has held meetings with some of the stakeholders. Now, the question is, things are afoot for the children to go back to school. Will the parents be able to send the children to school without any fright?
Is the environment
enabling enough? These are the things we are afraid of.
All right.
It is now a war. It becomes asymmetric, as we want to put it. It becomes asymmetric. You don't know who is who. You don't know the faces behind the mask. You don't know, even if it's the government, you don't know even if the government has a face behind the mask itself. So it becomes difficult to decipher who is who in this whole game.
Now let's take a break. As from the next edition of Tough Talk, we'll actually be taking coffee breaks. We don't have coffee for this edition, but let's just take a break. And when we come back, we'll be hitting a second major sticking point. It is the International Crisis Group's analysis of the Anglophone crisis. Briefly, and then we'll move on. And so, in a report released late last week, the International Crisis Group says the Anglophone crisis has finally exposed the limitations inherent in Cameroon's hyper-centralized system of government. It says that if such is left to prevail, Elie Smith, and this is a delicate question, the current crisis may not, finally culminate in a split of Cameroon as such, but that it would return in the midterm and may take the form of a violent struggle.
Yes, they are right, but I think it was incomplete, because whenever the conflict in Cameroon will turn violence, it will also be the beginning of the end of this fictitious union. I think that's what International Crisis Group were short of saying. Okay. Because the enabling environment is there. Everything is set for a showdown.
In fact, they actually said it. I don't like it when I brutally interrupt you, but I'll just turn over quickly to you, Henry. Would you agree? Because the report is actually titled Cameroon's Anglophone Crisis at the Crossroads, and it says that it is a crisis that's a direct consequence of the aftermath, Elie said it a while ago, of a poorly negotiated reunification.
Yes, it is a direct, it has a direct bearing with that, because to quote somebody like Moulin Jolly Toumbe, there was a marriage that never was. To say a concubine, or say we are living in a concubinage age, and that is what the Cameroonians west of the Mongol, for now we'll put it that way, are clamoring. And so it led now to the Southern Cameroon syndrome that has gripped them. So if they did not negotiate well at the level of Fumban, if they were tricked, or if they used something like money at the beginning to coax them, in the union, that one would understand. But there are a lot of things said about the Fumban conference. Sometimes some of these things were documented, others were never. But if you hear what was never documented in Fumban, you'll be very surprised that the word per diem made itself in Cameroon's administrative vocabulary in 1961, when those who went for the negotiations were given brown envelopes, and they were given what we call DC-40, a certain wine that they drank after food, and they were tired. So when they gave them that money, new banknotes, they slept off, and then they said, okay, negotiations will continue. So those are some of the things that were never documented. They were tricked during that ceremony. That's why I repeat, I said there were certain things that were never documented. And I said the word per diem got its place in Cameroon's administrative vocabulary from 1961, which means that the people had already known divine that at any point in time you can use money to corrupt. Yes. That is why the beginning of the crisis, they thought money could play the trick.
It didn't.
It has always played the trick, but at this point in time, money could not play the trick.
Elie Smith, I'll just give you a direct quote. The Anglophone problem is deep-rooted in a poorly negotiated reunification process based on a centralist and assimilationist venture by the Yaoundé regime.
I am absolutely correct. And if you could remember, I like to mention one person, one fine book. It is called Dossier Noir sur le Cameroun, and Elie. And I want to encourage those francophones who are watching us and their eyes wide open and ears that, okay, these guys want to set the country ablaze. The thing is that to the defense and discharge, yes, to the discharge of Amadou Ahidjo, the thing is that contrary to what Kejang thinks, and which I will not, because my heart bleeds when I hear Kejang saying that our leaders were bought, given what type of drinks you say?
It's kind of expensive wine.
Expensive wine. All right. Now,
those are the undocumented aspects of the Fumba.
Great.
How did you get the
documentation then? Be very careful.
The information is clear. If whoever wants to challenge this will come, and then we'll unveil what was said there.
But it's
listen, I got this information from somebody whose father was the photographer of John Bufoncha.
He also got the per diem. Wonderful. Drank the wine too.
Come on,
Elie, let's go with the
now the assimilationist is that the problem to the discharge of Amadou Ahidjo. Amadou Ahidjo was a puppet. He is an impostor. a guy who usurped a title that doesn't deserve, he did not deserve, which means that he was a kind of puppet. That's what I'm saying. He was, because the French saw West Cameroon as an extension of their rule. It was a kind of victory that Charles Dobell denied them in 1917. That's what the French thought. And they were the one who forced Ahidjo. And there's one something in Cameroon. There's one lie, an official lie that goes around talking about bilingual colleges. The lycée bilingue is a big lie. It was not to encourage bilingualism. It was to assimilate Anglophones. And that, I'm not the one saying it.
But these are structures where you have independent sections progressively. You have an English section entirely independent from the French.
No, the thing is that if you could recall, the first bilingual lycée that took place was not in East Cameroon, but in West Cameroon. And the idea was that people should learn English and French. But at the end of the day, the idea was that these people should become francophones. And Charles de Gaulle, it is written in that book that I always name here, told Amadou Ahidjo that, look, you're going to have two countries. In order to avoid having two countries, you have to kill English. And Ahidjo...
But there's a lycée bilingue in Betua, for example.
Yes.
Which means that, are those children there being forced to speak English?
No, now the thing is that...
assimilated with the English language?
No, the thing now is that Ahidjo and the French were shocked that the Anglophones could lose everything because they have lost everything in this union, right? They have not benefited except their language and their legal or judicial system.
Let me tell you what they've not benefited from, Elie. Apart from the perceived economic and administrative marginalization, the International Crisis Group additionally blames the crisis on rivalries and fractures among Anglophone elite who have failed and woefully so to form a common front.
No, it's a lie. They always use those elites that are not recognized to terrorize the few. Let me just take a simple example. Go to Manu, go to the BLM or to Meme, who are those, or go to Kope Maninguba. Once they have picked from the time of the Ewanoges, the Zubontanes, I'm talking now of the ones they pick the Ngolengoles, nobody comes and challenge them. Once they pick somebody like the former man who died, at the presidency, I'm talking about Professor Agbotabi. Once they pick people, the industrial elite or the economic elite like Tabetando, they are crushing machineries. When you go to the BLM and pick people like, I'm sorry.
That's your very dear.
Yes, when in the days you pick people, by the way, the BLM has nobody. Yes, they don't have this, so that's why we don't cross, by the way.
Elie,
yes.
The ICJ says, as a result of these fractures, we've seen an exponential rise in the number of pro-self-rule groups claiming to represent former West Cameroon.
Yes.
Correct?
I beg to differ with ICJ. The thing is that even those Anglophones, like the Tabetandos, the Agbotabis, the Achidiachus and things like that, they are people who are not honest. Because when they are in Yaoundé, where they are eating, where they are collaborating with the Francophones, what they do is that they lie to them. But when these people come back home, they have another image that they are giving. The thing is that, yes, there's a semblance of division. The problem is that it is a...
Is it a semblance, Elie Smith, when you have Maurice, you have Skakov, you have...
but no, the thing that the Skakov, the Morris, please just ignore them, right? I'm talking of people who are on the ground.
Right.
I have respect for Morris, they are abroad. I'm talking of people, you know, if you want to fight a battle, fight it on the ground. I'm talking of those guys who are here on the ground. The Anglophone nation is a nation that is one and indivisible. It is a nation. But the thing is that we have a government that has this attitude of divide and rule.
Okay.
They want to use it on West Cameroon. It has not succeeded. And if it was succeeding, we would not have had what is going on in the southwest and northwest regions of Cameroon.
Okay.
The problem of the government is that they wanted to do what they do here, whereby you have Basa groups, Bamileke groups in different, you know, oh, I am Banjun, I am whatever. But in Anglophone Cameroon, it doesn't work that way because one federating factor is that they are the Francophone government in Yaoundé who are a kind of uniting group. Because when you look at your enemy, you know that you have no cause. So I think that International Crisis Group cannot say it's because our elites are divided. Hence, no, it's simply because the central government of Yaoundé wanted to Francophonize Anglophone Cameroon, marginalize it economically. Hence, it has had a kind of boomerang effect today.
Keja Henry, going further, the ICJ notes that it would be fallacious to conclude that the driving force and the fuel for the current crisis comes from the diaspora. It says the diaspora only sprang into action following the arrest of leaders of the banned consortium on January the 17th.
They are correct.
So is the diaspora taking advantage
They
of
are
the
correct.
struggle?
Don't forget that prior to his arrest, because when the negotiations collapsed, Paul Gogomo went to Yaoundé, signed a communique done in Yaoundé, signed Paul Gogomo Mingo, and said there's no further negotiation.
That was unilateral and top down.
Read by on CRTV, read by Tewi Lambiv. Okay. The next day, Issa Chiruma had a press conference in which he said, le gouvernement va passer à la vitesse supérieure, which means that they will use all necessary machinery to clamp down on the leaders. It did not work. The leaders were there because when they announced that they were going to pass, use any machinery. In the evening, the Minister of Interior banned the consortium, and before 6 p.m., the leaders were arrested. That is the scenario they built up, which means because the leaders, it is said, it is averred that they had received information that they will arrest them and that they should run, which means if Bala Fontaine had disappeared, like Eyambe and Harmony D and Tassam, the battle would have ended at that level. Now, remember, there was a last communique sent by Bala and Fontaine saying that the activities of the consortium will be run by Tapang, Ivo, and Mark Barretta. So, which means that they sprang up, like you said, rightly, like ICG said, after the leaders were arrested.
In conclusion, and judging from the impacts of the measures taken so far by the government, Elie Smith, the creation of common law sections at INAM, at the Supreme Court, the setting up of a bilingualism and multiculturalism commission, the appointment of an Anglophone general and others, I mean, special recruitments for Anglophones. The ICJ says that despite all of these measures, it will only take sustained international pressure for the government of Cameroon to engage substantive dialogue.
Yeah, those things you have just mentioned are nonsense, because you cannot create a bench at the Commonwealth bench
at the
Supreme Court, which is like a department of one something like, right? It's something that, on the other hand, is
so
that... So
they should, you mean Anglophone Cameroon should have its own Supreme Court?
Not that. We want something
that
is a full-fledged division. Because when I was seeing another thing, I saw you have another department of what is just a kind of section. They are joking with us, one. And the other thing is that those who were clamoring for that, why did you have to arrest them? Okay. I want to believe that all those things they have done. And the other thing, divine. Anglophones don't want generals. If you care in your 50,000 strong Cameroonian army, including the Navy and the police,
put everybody
John Fruity has noted and remarked that the fact that Anglophone Cameroon counts only one general in the army is a clear indicator of marginalization. So English-speaking Cameroon needs more than
anyway, one. John Fruity is not wrong, but I think that they can even appoint 20 Anglophone generals. They can appoint 100 ministers. They have 56 ministers or 68 ministers. All of them can become Anglophones. It is not going to change what is going on. It's because this union is a fictitious union, and the people who have been hoodwinked for almost 5 decades or more are the Anglophones, and they just want a rectification of the cheating, of the status. Period.
Henry, very enough, but singing the same stanzas of the same verse, the ICG voices belief that the current crisis may affect the organization of elections in 2018, as well as the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations, if Cameroon doesn't lose the hosting right.
The hosting right, that's correct. It is already affecting it because, as we speak, though you had a marriage of self-proclaimed presidential candidates, without calling names here, for the 2018 elections, when we don't even know what is coming, because elections will be holding. The only person who has the electoral calendar is Mr. Bia. And when Eleka must have finished its work.
But we all know the elections are constitutionally slated.
They are constitutionally slated, but do you see elections holding when you find the Anglophone question not being solved? The equation is still very imbalanced. And do you foresee holding an election, for example, in Boya, in Bamenda Santa, an election in Kumbo or in Kika Ikilaiki? Let us be very careful.
Our greetings to the people of Kika Ikilaiki, to the people of Akwaya, to the people of Ngele, Menduka, and Kusiri, and why not all across Cameroon. Let's take a break. I told you before, we are going to be having a coffee break every now and then. But Gina Leke is going to come on board now because we're going to be trending the question, will Cameroon host the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations? There's tons and lots of debate on this. Gina will be here in a jiffy. I didn't actually know what a red tie on a blue shirt and a dark suit could actually do, but I can say it now thanks to you, Gina. You have an eye for these things. Welcome.
Thank you.
You're also dressed in blue and red?
Yes, I was trying to match up with you guys.
Thanks a lot. Now, will Cameroon host the Africa Cup of Nations in 2019?
That's $1 million question. I mean, there has been a lot of talk about the possibility of Cameroon hosting, or if Cameroon will not be able to host the 2019 African Cup of Nations. First of all, there has been this war of words between the president of the Confederation of African Football, that's Ahmad.
From Madagascar.
Exactly, from Madagascar. Recently, over the weekend, he was in Burkina Faso, and he made some statements that have really irritated authorities of football in Cameroon. He said that Cameroon still needs to prove to CAF that it will be able to host the prestigious African event. And he even mentioned that looking at the current Cameroon's current infrastructure, he doubts if Cameroon can be able to receive 4 teams, talk less of 24 teams that are going to be competing for the 2019 African Cup of Nations.
6 host venues. I mean, the number of venues will move from 4 to 6.
Exactly. And once the statement went viral on the internet, people were reacting. Cameroon football authorities have not been quiet because they were really irritated. And yesterday, the president of Cameroon Football Association, FECAFOOT, that is Tombi
Roko Sidiki.
Yes, he released a statement yesterday, and he said the utterances of Ahmad are unacceptable, and he says that they are alarming because Cameroon, he says, will be ready to host the African Cup of Nations come 2019. And he reminded Ahmad that it's not up to a year that Cameroon hosted the female African Cup of Nations.
And that was to give to Caesar what is Caesar's. It was about the most popular sporting event Cameroon has played host to in the last 20 or 30 years.
You're right, Divine. And he equally said that CAF actually sent them a letter of congratulations, yes, saying that they did a good job.
But Gina, and that's where the catch is. The CAF that sent Cameroon the congratulatory message after the AFCON, the Africa Women's Cup of Nations, was the CAF that was managed by Cameroonian-born Issa Hayatou. It's the same CAF that deprived Madagascar from where Ahmed comes of hosting the U20.
Exactly, that's what a lot of critics are saying, that Ahmad may just be paying Cameroon back in its coin because just a few months back, a certain plan masterminded, in quote, by the former president of CAF, Issa Hayatou, who is Cameroon-born, actually took away the pride from Madagascar from hosting the Under-17 African Cup of Nations, and which was eventually awarded to Gabon. So this exchange have continued, but Divine, I want us to not be so emotional because, I mean, to me, my own personal opinion is we are bringing in a lot of emotions here. Let's try to be realistic. Let Cameroon, let our authorities also try to be
get tough.
Exactly.
Get tough and get realistic.
Exactly.
Is Cameroon ready to host the tournament?
That is exactly what I'm going to talk about. I mean, let's look at the stadium we have. I'll take an example of the Japoma Stadium here in Douala. I mean, they are still at the level of excavating the stadium.
But I mean, that's not the issue. I can tell you, and this is from very reliable sources, that prefabricated material is coming into the country. In fact, at the weekend, there were 3,000 tons of construction material offloaded at the port in Douala.
Yes, it's true that they are prefabricated material, but how far? I mean, that's why when you asked the question, I was going to say there is the possibility, but there are others who think that Cameroon may not be able to host. So to me, I think the problem is that Cameroon needs to be determined and to prove its detractors wrong, because at this point in time, there are other nations that are already eyeing the position of hosting this.
The same Morocco,
yes,
which actually kind of bankrolled the election of Ahmed.
Yes, exactly. So I think, to me, if you ask me, I would say it's time for Cameroon to really be determined and get to work and make sure that
Minister
this stage
Chiroma Bakari Issa, who's Cameroon's Minister of Communication and Government Mouthpiece, would be very, very satisfied with your last declaration.
Yes, because, I mean, I just also want to say that other countries have done it and Cameroon can do it. I'll take the example of Congo, Brazzaville in 2015, when they were hosting the All-African Games. They constructed the Kintale Stadium.
A magnificent sports complex, which currently lies fallow, is not being maintained.
Well, yes, but I just want to look at the positive side of it. They constructed that stadium in about 9 to 10 months. I was just discussing with my great mentor, Elie Smith, a while ago. I mean, if...
to who Congo Brazzaville was actually a second home until recently.
So I think that if they could do that, Cameroon can. It's just that, unfortunately, there are many situations where Cameroon have given their word and they have failed. That's the reason why people find it difficult to believe them. But I think this is time for them not to be exchanging words, putting out releases. It's time for them to get to work and make sure that this stadia stand up strong when it's time for the African Cup of Nations.
Elie, Cameroon is currently going through a financial crisis. If you take the tumbling oil prices and commodity prices in general, the introduction of the economic partnership agreements and the dwindling revenues at the level of the customs, should Cameroon insist on hosting the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations? Isn't it just a wastage?
You know, from the word go, I've never been a fan of Cameroon hosting it. I think it's a wastage. It's really a wastage because that amount of money would have been used to create jobs, build some infrastructure. So I think it's a waste of time. And the other thing is, why would CAF accept us to organize it when we are arresting journalists? We have 7 journalists in detention. So will those other journalists come here and not get arrested? They might be arrested. So I think Cameroon doesn't deserve that thing.
The International Committee
of the Protective Journalists.
ICP actually says that Cameroon should be stripped of the hosting right if these journalists remain in jail.
Exactly.
Let's come back to you, Gina. We have 2 minutes to
yes,
go.
I was just yes, I was just going to say that, I mean, apart from the stadia, if we also have to look at other infrastructures like roads, hotels, hospitals, we are lagging behind. Take the example of a stadium like Bafoussam, which is complete. We can say it's complete, but when you look at the stretch of road, the access into the stadium, I mean, the road is dilapidated. How are foreigners, I mean, people who are coming into our nation going to get into the stadium with that type of, if it's not arranged before that time, I mean, it's going to be a huge problem. And just to mention, I mean, it's nothing new, but a team from CAF will be in Cameroon from the 20th to the 28th of August. I think after that inspection, we are going to know if actually Cameroon will retain the right to host.
That's your landing point, because we have an excerpt lined up for you up next. It actually pits Cameroon's communication minister, Issa Chiroma Bakari, to CAF boss Ahmed. Let's listen to them.
For the 2019 AFCON, Cameroon had proposed to organize the competition in 5 cities. During its meeting on 20 July 2017 in Rabat, Morocco, the CAF Executive Committee decided to move from 16 to 24 teams and to shift the period of the competition from January, February to June, July, with immediate effect as from 2019. The question that could be raised under these new modalities is whether the commitment made by Cameroon to organize the competition under the 16-team format would still hold under the 24-team format.
Au jour d'aujourd'hui, je peux vous confirmer, avec le standard, avec le cahier de charges qui est en place aujourd'hui, aucun site au Cameroun n'est disposé à accueillir la CAN. Au jour d'aujourd'hui où nous parlons.
On this matter, I would like to strongly reiterate the government's commitment to host the 2019 AFCON in the format decided by CAF, that is to say, with the 24-team format.
On verra. Vous avez entendu la déclaration des autorités politiques camerounaises qui nous annoncent qu'ils sont prêts pour ça. Pour nous, c'est tout simplement envoyer cette délégation pour l'inspection et prendre acte des rapports de ce match.
This inspection mission, like those that will follow throughout the process toward the deadline of the event, is not aimed at sanctioning.
L'hypothèse, c'est tout simplement d'attendre que les autorités camerounaises, avec la structure du football, il y a un comité d'organisation qui va accueillir la visite d'inspection et ces experts vont analyser la situation pour que ce ne sera pas la honte de la confédération ou l'organisation.
Cameroon will organize the 32nd edition of the African Football Cup of Nations in June-July 2019 period.
So that was it. Cameroon's Issa Chiro Mabakari and of course CAF boss Ahmed. Now our greetings to Lord Mayor Francis Wache. He's mayor of the Nkor Council, that's in Noni Hinbui division of the Northwest region. Our greetings to all of you out there watching this edition of Tough Talk. He can't be with us on this edition, Lord Mayor, because he's actually just coming back from a tedious journey. Thanks for keeping us informed, Lord Mayor. And so beginning last week, the government has been deploying emissaries to various parts of the world, including especially the US, Belgium, and South Africa, to clarify these countries' governments and the Cameroonian diaspora on the prevailing socio-economic paralysis across English-speaking Cameroon. And as predicted on this very set on August the 3rd, those missions have, one after the other, sequentially backfired and almost culminated in fist fights in some situations. Here are excerpts from the last edition of Tough Talk, and you hear Kejan Henry Atembe and Elie Smith actually predicting that no such thing could produce any good news. But before we get there, Elie Smith, we're not prophets of doom. It's not like we celebrate the failures of and the failings of this government, but we must check, keep the tabs on how the country evolves.
Yes, we have been vindicated simply because we have our ears and eyes on the ground. We are here in Cameroon, and we try to report accurately and honestly what we see. We had said time and over again in our last edition of the program that it is going to fail monumentally, simply because for so long the government of this country, this regime, has excelled in trying to trivialize what is going on. And then the other thing is that those who have taken on to themselves as a profession to make a travesty of this country will almost always meet this type of disagreement and this thought of humiliation.
Okay, and as we speak, Kejan Henry, another delegation has been announced for Ottawa, Canada on Thursday, the 10th of August. you can expect a similar flop.
Yeah, of course. Without necessarily being a prophet of doom, they will certainly just pick the cue from where the others drop. Why sending people on in fact, the government's communication strategy has failed to lure the people understand. The image building has failed.
Impression management and so on. Now let's go back to our machines, thanks to Roland Lebja and Beverica Emmanuel, and watch what previously we predicted on Toughtalk on August the 3rd. And so after repeatedly flopped attempts at resolving the protracting Anglophone problem at home, the government has dispatched delegations of high-profile government as well as CPDM personalities to the US, and we hear more recently to Europe. Can they finally source solutions to the Anglophone crisis from abroad, Keja Henry?
We already know the truth, or they already know the truth. The SPMs, or you call them Special Political Missions Abroad, headed by one, Gogomu is heading the one for the US, and
Gogomu, who some call a calamitous
flop after he could not negotiate with the teachers and went back with resolutions that were concocted and signed in Yaoundé and called it a Yaoundé resolution, which is, and in fact, was supposed to be the Bamenda resolution. That never was.
It's not workable. It's not workable. Then once again, I think this government is really incompetent, right? Because if I were the government of Cameroon, what I will do is that in almost all the delegations that I'm fanning out of the world to go and give my own position, I will at least take some Anglophones who have some credibility and who perhaps are sharing their point of view. When you take somebody like Paul Gogomo, who has failed woefully in previous negotiations, and when you take somebody like Elvis Ngole, who is an assertive CPDM member, and how do you expect to convince people at the United Nations or convince the Cameroonian diaspora? It cannot work.
And here we are today. So talking about the mission, which is a mission of lies telling, eventually they will speak. The world is not like it used to be before. Even as they are speaking in the hall, they are streaming and we are following. So anybody can easily decipher whether it is a lie or it's a truism.
This problem began here. The people who began the whole protest are here. Why don't you negotiate with them? The government should be humble enough.
Probably because America has become a playground for some of the staunchest separatist activists?
No, when you act out of panic, that's you are a kind of reactionary person. You don't have the necessary wherewithal. The strategy is not there. What I would have done first, if I were them, I would try to first speak with the Cameroonian diaspora.
Lies telling or not, Henry?
Yes.
Well, the separatists have been in touch with American congressmen and women. Okay. They've told them their own side of the story. And Elie was saying a while ago that, I mean, the missions are all tantamount to a waste of taxpayers' hard-earned money. But if the separatists can serve American congressmen and women their own version of the story, isn't it only but normal that the government sends its own emissaries to go and tell these people?
You are correct. You are correct. Even if the government did not send, those congressmen would have loved to have the version of the government of Cameroon rather than sitting on the fence and listening to one side of a story. The Anglophone crisis is consuming a lot of money. That is why the government too, even though it is borrowing for projects, the Anglophone crisis is another project. Because if you ask myself the question, what is the hell with the delegation? Do you know what is costing the government?
Okay, so the government needs to borrow to send
the government. Well, there are short-term. We know that there are short-term borrowings
to the crisis
and of course long-term borrowings.
The people of the diaspora, they are not necessarily all secessionists.
Yes.
The thing is, the people of the diaspora just want justice here in Cameroon. They want to be treated fairly and equally. And they have gone now, they did the right PR campaign. But the government of Cameroon, full of 80 and 100 years old people, waited for 8 long months before finding out their people out of the country. Why on earth do you think a US congressman or senator will believe in a government that has been in power for 80 years, corrupted everybody?
34, not
34, no, 34 years, I'm sorry, they are not a pre in Mexico.
And so that's how it happened on August the 3rd, or of course August the 8th, and those predictions have turned out to be true. Kejan Henry, some analysts say the emissaries, of course considering that despite the flops already recorded in Brussels, in South Africa, Pretoria precisely, the government is planning on deploying another team to Ottawa in Canada on Thursday the 10th of August. Some say on the sidelines of these missions, there is a hidden agenda by the government to fracture the Cameroonian diaspora.
It is going to be very difficult on the part of the government. I did not hear any emissary projected for the Middle East, knowing that now in the Middle East there's a very huge...
Dubai, Turkey,
name them. I did not hear any emission for the Asian countries.
Maybe they are coming. Let's wait and see.
So let us keep spending monies and sending people out of the country for the facelifting.
The question is, do you have the impression that they are going out, these delegations?
The delegation will not split them, because already if you look at what happened in South Africa, if you look at what happened in the US, only less than 50 people were in the hall. And they asked the question, why did you rent the council hall? And you go and organize a meeting in a small hall in the embassy, which is
in the US they call them the town halls.
I
guess Elie would correct you on that. Elie, some say you spending this amount of money to send so many delegations just to go and explain what the government is doing to resolve the Anglophone crisis means the government is scared of the diaspora. Why would it be?
Yes, I think...
Can this government be brought down? And let's face the facts and name them squarely by the diaspora.
Yes, because there is a precedent in history, Rwanda and Burundi. You know, remember after the coup d'etat in Burundi in 1961, the guys came back in 1994. The same thing happened in Burundi. Pierre Nkurunziza's father was an MP who was killed in 1961 or 72 or 73, but they came back, the Hutus, to take over power. The diaspora has been energized and galvanized because of the stupidity of the government of Cameroon, who seems to ignore people who are back home and think that they will go there and talk. Why will you tell the people in the diaspora when there is nothing to show?
In fact, you're going to foment more trouble.
You are fomenting more trouble, uniting them the more. I think that what is happening now, to be crude, is that another man's meat is another man's poison. These guys...
I like it when you say that, Elie.
Yes.
Quickly.
Yeah, because these guys know that they are going to fail, but they want to extort the government. Do you think that a man like Gogomo, do you think he knows he can say something in America? Or another pathological, arrogant failure like Laurent Esso, who was booed in Bafia? What do you expect him to go and do?
Now let's listen to a compilation of what we had to work on all night this night. It's a kind of a picturesque rendition of the events as they unfolded from Pretoria in South Africa through Brussels in Belgium to Washington, D.C. in the United States of America. When we come back, we will be rounding up.
And the worst one, that's English people.
The only corner reinforcement, police everywhere, is so in trouble. I beg you.
Et trouvons la voie qui permet aux Camerounais d'être Camerounais, ni francophones, ni anglophones, ni germanophones.
The whole place surrounded by police.
J'ai entendu parler de la grève des avocats. Ça paraît simplement étonnant que des avocats soient des juristes et ne savent pas ce que c'est qu'une grève. Une grève s'adresse à son patron. Le tribunal n'est pas le patron de l'avocat.
It is now more than a month that we have been on strike after having notified the government about our dissatisfaction with the erosion of the common law. And we have issued a series of communiques to the President of the Republic because his Minister of Justice has arrogantly and recklessly refused to listen to us.
Lorsque les Allemands quittaient le Cameroun en 1918, il n'y avait ni anglophone ni francophone. Il ne faudrait donc pas que les langues des autres, les cultures des autres, les religions des autres viennent divider un peuple camerounais qui n'est ni francophone ni anglophone, qui est Béti, qui est Bassa, qui est Wolo, qui est...
Soyons très attentifs.
Mr. Minister, you and your delegation, you have come here to talk about the Southern Cameroon problem. I know you are coming here to call us terrorists. I know you will come here and say there is an Anglophone problem. No, it's not an Anglophone problem, and it's not an internal issue. It is an international issue.
I want to tell you that I know all of us are still reeling, are still excited, are still dancing concerning the images we saw in Belgium yesterday. And some of you have even expressed disappointment that you wanted to see same in Washington, that it was not the same in Washington. But let me tell you that Professor Elvis Ngole Ngole, Professor Mingo Paul Gogomo, and Professor Nkot, I mean, they are high-ups in the CBDM party and they know exactly what to do. So that is why when they got to the United States, they took time of sent personal invitations and even transported brothers from the other side of the Mongo, French-speaking Cameroonians based in the United States, invited and transported them to Washington and made sure they only publicized the information of their visit a few hours to the event to make sure Southern Cameroonians don't show up.
Avec la chaleur de cet accueil et le calme que vous avez tous gardé face à des provocations, j'avoue que nous sommes venus parler aux Camerounais. Le chef d'État nous a pas demandé de venir éduquer ceux qui veulent faire la politique à l'étranger.
Save British Cameroon! 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 Save British.
So the case concerning the mission to Brussels by Justice Minister Laurent Esso is particularly pathetic, Enrique Jean-Tembe. We didn't want to show you the humiliating aspects of that footage because a bodyguard was actually punched to the floor. Flawed.
Well, Divine, when you say it's pathetic, I don't want to say it's pathetic. I want to say it is a good thing for people to know, because we should cherish information technology.
They say information is power.
It's
knowledge
power.
is
It
power.
has gone viral. We used to say here that if we did not have all these information outlets, they would come tomorrow and, you know, brutalize us here, and they would tell us that we lied, whereas these are the proofs.
Okay.
We did not shoot the pictures. It went viral over the social media.
The booing and jeering of the minister actually began in Bafia, where he was almost declared persona non grata at the burial of Monseigneur Jean-Marie Benoit Bala. But Elie Smith, Minister Laurent Esso says terminology is crucial in these matters. He says terminology purists, and this is correct, would agree with him that there was no strike by common law lawyers in Northwest and Southwest regions.
Okay, you are sarcastic. You do your role, then it's normal, right? But when he said that nonsense he said, you had the immediate response of Mr. Bob Gahamoni. They had notified him. The problem with this government is Laurent Esso. Can he not speak English? He's so arrogant, he takes himself to be God.
We deliberately did not do a translation for his...
No, we don't have to translate it because look at his alter ego, the minister Fam Ndongo. He speaks English. He tries to speak English. Everybody's tried to speak English, but Laurent Esso wants to defy the Anglophone of this country because he humiliates everybody. I understand because he has a house here in Douala near the house of Paul Biya. So he thinks that he's a successor, the heir apparent. It is not going to work.
We still need to remain decent.
We are decent. I am angry. Yeah, no,
don't get emotional.
I'm not getting emotional because you have one man who is the architect of the problem that we are having here today. And the thing is that when he got booed in Bafia, I am a Christian. And now till I die, I will always stand by what the Christians think about this government, about Clade and everything. So he went there and failed. I'm not happy, but I think he deserved that failure.
We have actually encroached into time reserved for the papers, and all our apologies to Gladys Ambo Dibang, who is going to be coming up next with today's edition of the papers. Don't you forget, there's a rebroadcast of Toughtalk at 8:30 p.m. tonight after the news. We come back on Thursday with another edition, and we'll be settling once more on the hostile reception reserved for the emissaries being dispatched by Yaoundé across the world. Until then, stay safe, run out of trouble on the double until we meet again. Thank you very much, Emmanuel Bivika, Roland Lebja, and of course, Chamani Patrick for handling this other edition of the show.